just as we held the South African regime responsible for those massacres, the Jacob Zuma ANC government is responsible for what's gone on with the death of these mine workers, the massacre of these mine workers in the last few days. So we're saying we hold Jacob Zuma responsible, we hold the ANC responsible, because they have followed economic policies which have meant the poor in South Africa stay poor, even worse off in many cases than they were under the old apartheid regime, and a tiny number of people have become obscenely rich. And there are some black faces in that group now, but the system hasn't changed. And just as we saw massacres in the 60s and 70s, we're seeing them now in 2012. It's not on. We have to get change in South Africa. We're supporting the groups in South Africa that are working for change, working for decent health, decent education, better wages, the union movement, the ones that are fighting on the ground for better wages and better conditions. We want to see those organisations gain strength in South Africa. But the ANC at the moment is putting enormous pressure on any group that shows its face to protest against what the government is doing. We want to see real change in South Africa that brings hope for people, that brings true liberation for the people of South Africa. And what we saw today is just reminiscent of what's gone on in the past under the old regime. So thank you all for coming today. In a couple of minutes we're going to head up to the consulate. And we'll present a letter. We've already emailed the letter through to the consulate, but I don't think there's anyone in there, and we'll stick it on the front door, and we'll leave it at that for now. Kia ora. Anyone else like to say a few words?
So the latest number that we've heard this morning is that there's over 48 workers dead, right? And there's probably more to come, because the police, the ANC's police, the state police of South Africa, used live machine gun rounds on workers that they'd already corralled. They had no other place to go except forward, because they've been surrounded by razor wire on all the three other sides. This is a massacre on the scale of Sharpeville, on the scale of Soweto. This is a turning point in the history of South Africa. And like all other previous massacres, mobilised the movement from below, so this massacre will unleash the fury that many of the poor and many of the working class in South Africa have felt for over 2 decades now. When we took to the streets in New Zealand, when we took to the streets in Ireland, when we took to the streets in the United States in solidarity with the people of South Africa, we did not fight for this. We did not fight for an ANC government to butcher the people, to butcher the working class movement like they did yesterday. And shame on anybody who meets with the ANC in future in this country. Trade union leaders, people of the left, should have nothing to do with this party, which, like the pigs in Animal Farm, have turned into the humans and betrayed the principles of the Freedom Charter, have betrayed the principles of Chris Hani and of millions of organised workers who fought the regime in the strikes to bring down apartheid. Apartheid was never just purely a formal political system. It is an economic system as well, and the wealth of South Africa, the gold, the diamonds, the platinum, are still not in the hands of the people who live in shacks. That platinum mine is owned by an English company called Lunmin. Have a look at the pictures of the people before they were massacred as they marched out of the dwellings that they lived in. They live in shacks. They dig platinum for the rich of this world. What we're going to see in the next few months, I believe, in South Africa is a decisive battle now between those from below who believe in socialism from below, like the trade union movement, like our friend Zabu Zakode in the Shack Dwellers Association, and their enemy, Know your enemy. Your enemy is the ANC. Your enemy is the leadership of Kasafu. Your enemy is the leadership of the South African Communist Party that has betrayed the trade union movement, that has bullied and hassled and even murdered the militants within the trade union movement. Well, no more. Don't expect that this fight will be one-sided anymore. Victory to the South African Revolution.
The anti-apartheid movement of New Zealand has a proud history. We stood alongside the people of South Africa to throw that picket line around South Africa so that injustice and exploitation could not be continued. The people of the world who opposed apartheid and stood alongside our brothers and sisters there did not do that for the big multinationals to profit from the hard work and resources of that country. The terrible bloodbath that we have seen in South Africa in the last day or so is something that we saw in Soweto, in Sharpsville, and those were the despicable acts that we were opposed to. The people of South Africa called on the world to stand alongside them, and we have for many decades. Today, I think it's really important that we reiterate the stand that we are opposed not just to the act that has happened, but the reasons for it. The reason for this massacre is because big corporations want to make profits. The rich and powerful of the world will never share the wealth. So it's up to ordinary people like us, our families and friends, and the people of South Africa to say no to the big corporations that are making equal profits in New Zealand as they are in South Africa. So today we stand alongside those people who in South Africa, whether they be shack dwellers, whether they be workers who are trying to get a decent wage. We all need to struggle for a real democracy, because a real democracy is by the people, for the people and of the people, and the ANC has not delivered that.
Listen, this is an open letter to South African President Jacob Zuma. Kia ora, President Zuma. Many New Zealanders who demonstrated so strongly against the apartheid system in the 1970s and 1980s have watched with growing alarm at the direction the ANC leadership has taken South Africa since the first democratic election in 1994. The events of the last week, culminating in the massacre of 34 striking mine workers with dozens injured, is the inevitable outcome of the ANC choice to follow free market economic policies which, wherever and whenever they've been employed in human history, they have always transferred wealth from the poor to the rich and stripped hope from the majority. Under the ANC, we've seen South Africa change seamlessly from race-based apartheid to economic apartheid. We didn't protest here just to see a few black faces at the top table in South Africa. We didn't turn out in our tens of thousands to face batons and barbed wire, so the likes of former anti-apartheid leaders such as Cyril Ramaphosa, Tokyo Sexwali and Julius Malema could become obscenely rich off the backs of South Africa's workers. 34, or in fact 48 of whom were riddled with police bullets 2 days ago. The appalling scenes played out on our TV screens are reminiscent of the darkest days of apartheid, such as the Sharpeville massacre of 1960 and the murder of black school children in Soweto in 1976. Just as we held the apartheid regime responsible for those massacres, we now hold the ANC government responsible for the massacre of striking mine workers. You and your government, President Zuma, have blood on their hands. This year is the 100th anniversary of the formation of the ANC. It should be a time of pride and celebration for all the people of South Africa. But the betrayal of the struggle by the ANC leadership leaves most of us cold. As a spokesperson for Abahlali Baza Mjondolo, which is struggling for decent housing against violence and intimidation, said last month, All is slowly sinking as the new government is making sure that we remember the heroes of the struggle, but not what the struggle was for. At this time of deep sadness for those injured and their families, and anger at the ineptitude, self-service and corruption running to the core of your government, we stand once more with the poor and the oppressed people of South Africa and their struggle for freedom, hope and dignity. Kia ora koutou.